This is the 21.5 Show.
You're on 121.5, the emergency frequency.
Whether you're a professional pilot or want to be one, you're in the right place.
Let's get started.
Join professional aviators Dylan and Max as they talk their experience in the airlines, business aviation, and more.
Life is good.
Industry experts, unique stories, and plenty of fun. This is the 21.5 Show.
Here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, pilots from around the world, welcome to another episode of the 21.5 Show. It is a semi-professionally operated podcast for professional pilots. There is one professional broadcaster on this show. Unfortunately, he doesn't talk that much, but you'll just have to listen to Max and I instead. My name is Dylan. I am a professional pilot in business aviation, and I'm, of course, joined by my co-host, brother-in-law, and mentor.
Professional pilot, amateur broadcaster in the airlines and business aviation and general aviation.
I also forgot to mention that you are certified with ham radio operator.
That's right. No big deal. KG7 ELP.
Yeah.
You know,
Are you really?
it's a thing.
You're actually amateur radio.
So, yeah, I did it with a purpose. It was actually really cool. Yeah, this is true. We would go camping, and one of my other buddies had gotten it when he was a young kid. Like his dad had him do it, and he's like, "You should get your thing." And then, like when you go camping, and he would go camping, he'd leave early and be in the middle of nowhere in the woods. So I've had no way to find him because he'd lose cell phone service and go. And so we figured out the only way we could communicate is through a repeater on the ham radio. So I'd leave and I'd be like, N1 VP or whatever is, I don't remember his call sign, but I'd call him and the repeater network and this whole thing. Like I'd be hitting a repeater in Phoenix. It was a whole geeky thing, but it actually worked out really good. So I'm like, where are you located? And he would tell me. And then as I was on my way. So wait, Joel, did I not strike you as an amateur radio enthusiast?
I'm not sure if I could see you at like ham swap meets. Let me just, you know.
You haven't seen pictures of the 80-foot tower Max has in the backyard?
That I've erected in accordance with local zoning regulations.
Yeah, he does the nightly check-in with a lot of his friends over in the Asia-Pacific region.
Is this how you met James O'Neill? He was working in the King Air.
Yeah, I'm constantly monitoring the height of the tropopause and looking to bounce low-frequency wavelengths to try and hit Australia. So
Off to
I have a lot of friends out there.
Don't they like send a postcard? Isn't it a thing where like you get a hold of somebody and then they send a postcard? Yeah.
I can't remember what that's called, but yeah, there is like you make contact with somebody and then you have like a card, like a business card, I don't know, some sort of card, and then you like send it in the mail and you keep track of like your...
Joel, offline, we'll have to tell you about some of the times Max and I would enjoy a couple cold beverages and then check on this thing called the RimNet.
Oh.
We've derailed the show. Every professional pilot's tuned out. Yeah, not the RimNet. I can't remember what it was called.
Let's move along.
Anyways, this is actually a show for pilots here. Let's redeem ourselves with some aviation, Max. I know you took your bird out flying over the weekend for some adventures. How did everything go? How did all the cylinders, the many cylinders that you are in control of, how did they work?
There's always this one pesky cylinder that's very hot. Gives me a lot of stress. Keeps me up at night. But other than that, no, the airplane ran good. We flew to Tombstone, Arizona with the family, and we went to the OK Corral and watched the shootout reenactment with Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday and everybody, and saw all that stuff. And then we went to Bisbee and went on the mine tour and all that stuff. So it was a cool little weekend. But here's what's funny. So kids, they don't have a lot of perspective, right? So they, sometimes they think like getting in a plane and flying somewhere for the weekend is like a normal thing. And so I'm like, oh, this is gonna be great. We're flying right over Tucson, and I'm just north of Tucson, kind of against the mountains there. And I'm like, we flew right past Boneyard. I'm like, hey guys, check it out. On the right hand side's the biggest parking lot of retired airplanes, and nothing. Right? I don't hear anything. I'm like, what? And I turn around. Every single kid is passed out. One, but not only that, they have a blanket over their head. So I don't know how long they haven't been looking out the window for. And I'm just like, dude, really? Like,
what are we doing?
All this money and effort and all of this. And this is then all I hear 30 minutes later. How much longer? Are we almost there? I'm just like,
have you taught them at least how to pee in a Gatorade bottle or anything like a life skill?
No, not yet, because I have a very strict peeing right before engine start policy. So anyway, we go down there, we land, and the guy has this is a small airport, unattended, like parking for like 4 airplanes maybe on this ramp, but the guy just took over and sells fuel there now. So he's like, yeah, I got a car for you. I go over to get this truck. I knew it was a truck. That's all I knew. And I get it's this lifted like 1998 Ram 1500 on like mud tires. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Like I get so excited because I'm like, I can't wait to drive around in this hoopty with the kids because it's great that you fly there and you kind of do this thing. And then all of a sudden you get in this just beater and drive around town.
Wait, hold on. You're driving by the southern Arizona border. You got kids in the back with a blanket over their head. Aren't you going to get like pulled over by like Border Patrol or something?
It's a lot of things that I wasn't expecting. But anyway, it was really fun. And we drove this. It doesn't start. The battery's dead. I have no way to jump it. I can't jump it from the plane. And
that would be incredible.
So the guy comes, we jump it, we get it going. It's all part of the adventure. So
whole airport car adventure. Well, that's cool. Well, I'm glad you're using your airplane, and your kids will look back on that, and it'll be awesome.
Yeah, that's what I always say. I'm like, yeah, one day they'll look back when they have a little more perspective. Maybe
a little more perspective, or like when they're interested in impressing girls. I feel like that's probably not that far off, right? And then they're starting to use the airplane ride thing. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
I don't know. We'll see.
Well, I'll tell you who's impressing people, and that is our guest, Pete, who flies in the Commemorative Air Force and flies World War II bombers and some really cool airplanes. We got a really interesting interview with him coming up that I think folks are going to enjoy. I always kind of known that the World War II kind of vintage aircraft are flying, especially at air shows, but we got into like how that actually happens. How do you train a pilot to fly an old airplane? How do you maintain it? It was pretty interesting. I really enjoyed it, and I think our listeners will as well, Max.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good. It's just like anything else. We all know that there's crop dusters or all these other things, but you really don't know how that actually works. So it's always fun to take a deeper dive into that, which this was round 2 for poor Pete because he had to sit next to me for a 3-day. Very similar, but more in depth.
You're making me and Joel's job so easy because we just send you out to go fly airline with these different people, and then you come back from a trip. Oh, we're going to talk to this guy. He does this, and it's perfect.
That's the best part about the airline gig, dude. There's so many pilots. You get to fly with different people all the time. And
always something new. I'm just picturing you interviewing this guy straight for 3 days. Hold on. What about how do you overhaul a prop on a
we got into it. Where they send the motors. Yeah. Do they have spares? Like, how do you prevent hydrolock? I mean, it was dirty. It was nasty. I'm telling you, this interview just barely scratches the surface of how it worked. Pete and I ended up at the end of a 3-day.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, you have that to look forward to coming up, and a large mailbag. We've got to get through some online discussion about the headsets. Of course, another installment of flight advice. Let's roll right into it. Joel, I saw a lot of conversation on Instagram. I don't know. Did you monitor any of that with our headset conversation?
Got a few to pass along here with you. Gilly Hawk says Ted wearing the ship set explains a lot.
It essentially sums it all up. That's about it.
Yeah.
That's good.
And he's pretty matter of fact about it. Anyways, Chris Taylor says Telex 750 all day, y'all.
Yeah.
Ooh.
That's my boy. That's my roommate from in the dorms in college. CT, shout out. What's the 750? That's the regular Telex.
That's the regular, that's what Ted wears.
That's what he wears?
Yeah.
Such a minimalist.
Because those big Airbuses, they are pretty good. The Airbus is pretty quiet in the cockpit. That's why.
The other thing, too, we should have asked is he's probably only wearing it until they get to cruise or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah. If you really want to make friends with Ted. Yeah.
Aviator Mark says DC Pro X is better than all of those. Don't at me. Which in the youth, as they say, that really means don't argue with me. I just want to let you guys know.
Oh.
Is that right?
In the parlance of our times?
No. Joel, what you would say if you were in the youth right now, you'd go, heard.
The young people.
Heard.
Bussin'.
You know the other one the youth are using right now that I hate?
What it is?
Is when like you're talking, bet. Oh, bet. So annoying.
Right.
Anyway.
Just scoped a Reddit thread on this exact topic. A20s are superior. P.S. In-ear kills my little baby ears. I just got me some DC-1Xs. I'm so excited to use them for training to fit aviatrix.
I think the people that complain about the in-ear thing, quitters. You just got to try it for like a month. You just got to get used to it. Overcome some adversity, Challenge yourself. Just kidding.
Wow.
And over on LinkedIn, great show, guys. I thought most pilots wore A20s because we're notoriously frugal, and that's what we wore as students in CFIs, Tom.
I don't know that.
That's actually a pretty good theory. You spent the money, like you said. See, this makes sense because remember, Max, you were so upset people wearing A20s in jets because it was too much hearing protection for the jet. But it's because when they were broke flying the Pistons, they saved up the money, bought the A20s, and now they're like, man, I have so much invested in this, I have to keep wearing it.
To get their money's worth.
That's a good theory, Tom.
You want to hear something funny about A20? Like I have A20s in my plane, which we talked about, and one of them, like cord is kind of in bad shape and it's starting to short, and so the noise canceling to turn off, and it's kind of clapped out. So I brought it home, and the only option, you cannot replace the cable. You have to replace the whole shebang, the whole battery box and the whole thing for $300 from Bose, right? And I'm like, there's no way. So I go on eBay. I find in China they make the cord with the mic end of the connectors and then just wires, just pigtailed. And so right now I'm currently going back and forth with a dude in China sending photos of the other end of the cable. I'm like, can you make me this cable? So I'm trying to really save myself,
Max, you know how you could speed up this conversation is by hitting him up on the ham radio. I think the ionosphere is high enough tonight. You could probably...
It just depends on what I think the solar flares are too strong right now, Dylan.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I haven't checked the solar almanac to see.
Yeah.
Wow. Is that right? Is that a thing? Joel, you're like in our agricultural almanac. I don't know.
I'm a 2-meter guy, dude. It's like barely. It's like walking status. So. Why, Joel, are you a ham radio guy?
I could see myself being there.
Yeah, I could. I think we all could.
Don't, Joel, don't admit that. Joel, stop right now.
I know. Says the guy with the radio.
No, I have a question for you. In your day job, where you actually are a professional broadcaster, Joel, do you have to have any FCC credentials? You personally?
No. The station owner does. Now we have to follow SAC rules, so like no cussing and things like that. But like the radio station managers, they all deal with that. They have to abide by certain wattage requirements and all those things.
Do you have to say the radio call signs like WNBC?
Hey.
You know what that's
close. 98.3 WPKO, 1390 WBLL, The Bell. Nope, I don't do that one.
You are talking for a living on a radio, and you don't have to have an FCC license, and yet meanwhile, we do.
Yeah, Joel, I don't know if you know, I also have a FCC restricted radio telephone operator certificate. So
yeah,
that's pretty deal. We can talk about that after the show.
Well, that's a whole other episode. That could be a 3-part series.
I digress. Anyway, continue.
Yeah. You're so cool. Anyways, on the Bose A20 AeroCoast cooler discussion, had a question there. Will a Bose A20 in a case fit? R. Duncan.
If you don't want to carry anything in the cooler, yes. But if you intend to use the cooler and fill it with food, the answer is no. No headset will fit in there. Your iPad barely, and some sunshades. That's all.
Hold on. Wait, I got a point of clarification, Max. You mean that it will fit in that little top area or like in the actual cooling area?
I don't think it would fit in there. It's too thin. The A20, like in the case? No, there's no way. So what I do is the compromise with the AeroCoast is you get to only carry one bag in addition to your rollerboard, which is great. And you can do everything except you cannot fit your headset in there. And so I have a carabiner that I clip it in its case to the AeroCoast. And so it's like a little sidecar, if you will. That's the only solution that I've come up with. Or you could clip it to your rollerboard, which some people do too. So that is the sacrifice. Otherwise, you got to carry a third bag if you want to put in the bag.
Well, so Max, here's what I've noticed. We had a huge response to the headset discussion. We still got a ton of people talking to us about the coolers. These gear reviews seem pretty popular. So our question to you folks is, what's the next item you want us to do for a gear review? Is it a rollerboard suitcase? Is it something else? Hit us up, info@215podcast.com. Let us know, and we'll get our team of experts on board to get a review. I feel like it would be really fun to just, whatever it is, send one to Ted. And then we would like call him and be like, hey, Ted, did you get a chance to review that suitcase? He'd be like, no.
Ted.
Yeah.
Ted, now go ahead and tell us how stupid the item we just sent you is, please.
Yeah, exactly. I ain't using that.
Tell us how terrible it is.
Yeah.
And how useless it is. Go ahead.
So I think it'd be a real life review. So, yeah, shoot us an email. Let us know. Speaking of email, it's time to jump into the mailbag, which, of course, is brought to you always by our friends at Advanced Aircrew Academy, the authority in digital education. Who are we just talking to, Max? And they're like, oh, Advanced Aircrew Academy, they're so great. I don't have to do the training. It's so much better than the training at
Roy Hill.
Yeah. He's like, oh, I used to do the training with the 3 letters online training that we won't mention, but I think many 135 operators know who we're talking about. Upgrade your training. Teach your pilots something they actually want to learn. The modules Advanced Aircrew Academy create are awesome. We enjoy them. We'll have a link in the show notes to some of our favorites. Thanks for sponsoring the mailbag. Joel, what do we got?
I just found your podcast and love it. This is the podcast I've been looking for. So much great info. I'm a former ORD-based 145 FO from ExpressJet. I left the airline in the industry in 2012 due to losing my medical. I was a low-time hire back in 2010 at 750 total time with 100 multi. It was brutal dark time when I was there. The United Continental merger was just happening, and a short time later, the ExpressJet ASA cluster 5 leg days were normal for us on reserve, as well as getting reassigned at the end of a 4-day. 8-hour overnights didn't exist. I was tired literally all of the time. Crew scheduling had no concept of calculating taxi time, parking, unloading, turning off the jet for the night, walking the hotel van, and the trip to the hotel. With that stress piling up, I had to go on antidepressants. I did not disclose the medications on my annual because I knew I would lose my medical. I got caught, got drug tested, and got a positive result for benzos, Xanax. Yes, it was stupid of me and 1,000% my own doing. However, the medications were helping tremendously. Do you all know if there will ever be a day the FAA reevaluates the list of medications they deem no-go meds? Sean?
Well, first of all, shout out for the 145 FO out of Chicago.
Yeah.
Those were the days. Let me tell you.
That was like painful.
Talk about drinking from a fire hose, dude.
Yeah. It just bringing back all those memories to me. That was like, ooh.
It is. That's awful. This is the same thing we keep hearing, which is the medical system is woefully inadequate for mental health concerns. It's terrible that you have to do this on the sly and then get caught and lose your medical for something that was probably making him better overall person and probably a better aviator at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
Which, not that we're in any position to evaluate the side effects of taking Xanax and how it might affect your ability, but the answer to his question, in my opinion, is yes. I think there will be a day because the discussion is already being had. The unfortunate part of that is it's going to be painfully slow.
Yeah.
It's just going to take forever. That's just the way it works. In the FAA and the aeromedical division, as specifically, just seems to be the slowest of all of them.
Yeah. It just seems like full CYA mode. And I don't know how we should have my wife on the show who knows a lot more about medication, but
because she's a pharmacist, not because she's married to you.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
To be clear for everyone.
Xanax could have a very mild effect on one person, and then an antidepressant could have a very strong effect on somebody else. So it just seems like, man, they have to develop some way of creating metrics.
There's got to be a path, dude.
There has to be something that they've got to do, but I agree with you. It's probably not anytime soon. But I will tell you, I think now more than ever, there are probably other pilots in a similar situation. There are other opportunities outside of the cockpit right now. It doesn't mean you have to walk away from aviation if you have to take a mental health break or you have to get on a medication that is going to require you to maybe be outside the cockpit. I've never really thought about a drug test. Everyone's gotten a random drug test, but it just never occurred to me that Xanax was going to be something they were going to be doing a random drug test for, you know?
Yeah.
I was thinking more like illicit drugs or something like that. But I think there's still ways to stay in aviation right now, especially now more than ever. So thank you for writing in, Sean. That was very interesting. I wish we had an answer for you, but sadly, no.
What's next, Joel?
I work for an airline. I live in base, 14-minute drive to the terminal. I'm an FO with 20 months of seniority, 63% in company. With that, I have no issues getting a great schedule. Last month, I had 18 days off in a row while crediting 100 hours pay. May will be the same. In June, I plan to go back to SCR, but be the most senior in base and thus collect the month's paycheck while not working one day. I also volunteer as a LOSA observer for the safety department, and I'm starting volunteer work for Union. I'm at an American Airlines regional, and with this quality of life for my family, I'm not jumping to the first ultra low-cost carrier that calls, rather staying until I can get to American where I can continue to live in a base for the career. I despise commuting. Please ask Ted to come on the show more. I love his saltiness. And also ask him what he thinks of pilots with shined versus unshined shoes. I personally roll my eyes at all the pilots who take so much time on hair, face, and uniform only to have ugly shoes craving some attention.
Amen.
Thanks for the work on the great show. And Joel's done a great job joining the team. Yes, that's right. And I'm a +1 for Roger Reeves. What a life he's had. Cheers, gents.
Okay. Now, I sent this.
Lot there. I'm a big Grant fan. Big Grant.
Yeah, huge. So I sent this to Ted.
You did?
Yes. Here's what Ted said. Don't commute. Get a shine once a month. Charlotte is the best with the blowtorch.
Well, all right. What's next, Joel?
Once a month.
That sums it up.
Yeah, there we go.
The
Thank you for
blowtorch is
handling
really
that.
the
Ted.
icing on the cake there. Thank you, Ted.
Do you ever get your shoes shined in the terminal?
No, Dylan, I don't let other people shine my shoes. Any self-respecting man shines his own shoes at home. We all have to wear the same uniform. Some people put effort into that, and some people don't. You have to decide which side of the line you're going to fall on. If you want to wear ill-fitting shirts and pants and whatever shoe you could find at wherever that was the cheapest, clearly.
DSW, yeah.
Listen, you fall within the uniform guidelines, and there's not much you can say about it. But there is another method. You can wear the same uniform and put some effort into it and wear nice shoes. But he's right. If you're going to do it, either do it or don't. Don't go halfway and then wear some crummy shoes.
I just started wearing some new black. Now that I'm the king of the castle, I've got a very nice uniform in place. There's no epaulets. There's no tie.
Well, that's the thing with business aviation, too. You can put some effort in there, too.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't look bad. It's just comfortable. All right. Well, that's going to do it for the mailbag. Thanks to Advanced Aircrew Academy, as always, for sponsoring aircrewacademy.com. If you'd like to send us a note and let us know your thoughts on shoe polish etiquette or other uniform items, info@215podcast is the address. I think it's time to jump into this main event, Max. Let's talk to Pete and learn about the commemorative, I have a hard time saying that, Commemorative Air Force.
All right, Dylan, on the show today, we have Pete, who is a retired lieutenant colonel from the Air Force, current captain at an airline that I happen to also fly at. We flew together on a 3-day. He's also very involved in the Commemorative Air Force. So I peppered him with questions for 3 days. And then at the end of it, I was like, wow, this would be really interesting on our show. Pete, would you mind coming on? And so here we are to rehash everything out, but with you this time, Dylan. So Pete, welcome to the show.
Hi, Pete.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Also, Pete, before we get started on the CAF stuff, Pete was the one that turned us on to the Kee Bird, which was the homework assignment from the last episode of the show where we posted the link. We saw that a lot of you clicked on it and watched it. It was, a less than an hour kind of documentary on a World War II airplane recovery that was pretty awesome. So yeah, and I had not finished Pete refused to tell me like anything that happened. It's just a lot of stuff that goes down, but I didn't have a chance to finish it while we were on our trip. I didn't finish it till after. So we haven't even talked about it. So I guess we could start off real quick, talk about that. I was like, wow, everybody that didn't watch it, the major spoiler alert here. So if you're still into it, you may want to fast forward, but it was just, everything was like, no way. So they're going to find this airplane in the middle of nowhere. Then they're going to fly in this Caribou and then the flaps fail with the bulldozer in it. And you're like, no. And then they break one of the landing gear, it's just, or the tire comes off and they finally get the thing. And and the poor lead mechanic guy that's been working his ass off.
Well, he was getting sicker and sicker
sicker and sicker. But then it's like, okay, well, they got him back to Thule and they're like, yeah. And then they flew him out to Canada. He was admitted to the hospital. They're like, oh, phew, that was a close one. And 2 weeks later, he died. I was like, what? No, you can't die. It's insane. But then finally he gets to the end and he's like fired up and he breaks it loose and he's taxiing. You're like, no way. I cannot believe this is going to work. And then fire breaks out and you're like, at the end, when he's sitting there in a lounge chair, they brought in motors and props and they've installed GPS. The whole thing. And he's literally just sitting there watching the thing burn to the ground. I almost wept. Yeah.
In a lawn chair. Yeah. This is Nova. So, Pete, here was the thing that blew us away. I'd never even heard this story. So how did this even come on your radar?
I've been involved in the warbird industry since the late 80s. And so we kind of knew about it. And a friend of mine was just like, hey, man, you got to watch this documentary. And I think it was probably around 95, 96 when the documentary came out, maybe a little later than that. It was just, same thing. It's an hour of just, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. Oh my gosh. I can't believe it. It's extraordinary. It really is.
It's funny because we just don't have those many products where the ending is so disappointing, and unfulfilling. You have all this tension building, and then it's
heartbreaking. Really,
all because
it's unbelievable. So, what is the latest with the Kee Bird? Like, have you heard?
As far as I know, I actually looked it up on Wikipedia this morning, and the last thing they had was like a satellite photo of it's out there. The wreckage is out there on the lake bed. And that was as of 2015 or something like that. So I'm sure that there's no reason to go back up and salvage any of it at this point.
Max, this summer, let's take a fact-finding mission in the Murphy Moose up there.
Good idea.
Yeah, get up there and we'll land in the soft tundra. And
I'm sure it's beautiful. Really 250 miles north of Thule.
Yeah, the problem is we wouldn't be able to get back to Thule. So that would be problem number one. Well,
listen, a lot of people overcame challenges up there. So
the other funny thing about that is when I looked at the Wikipedia on Kee Bird, just to kind of refresh myself a little bit, is that they were going from Fairbanks to the North Pole and back to Fairbanks was the original flight. And they wound up in Greenland. They just completely, when you get lost, apparently you get lost.
Why did they crash? I didn't even know why they crashed initially. Did they run out of gas?
Yeah, they ran out of gas.
They landed because
they were just lost and
the snow beat, I guess the Bombay doors took the brunt of the beating from landing out there. And then,
right.
They had to bring tires in and all those
where does the money come from for something like that?
He had investors.
That I don't know.
Private investors?
Honestly, it didn't address it. And I'm sure that he had sponsors that would be, owners of the aircraft or something like that to help out.
I've heard of a lot of
I don't think the documentary addressed it.
So it was a fuel line in the APU that, you saw him. It was pretty rough out there. He was driving around.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What a story. So anyway, Pete, thank you for bringing that to our attention. That was something else.
It's hard to watch, but I
tell you, sometimes Nova comes through with a hell of a documentary.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
That's crazy. Well, Pete, you have such an interesting background with your warbird flying and your military flying. So I'd love for you to just kind of give us a little bit of a picture about your history and how you got to the place you're at now, flying these beautiful warbirds around the state of Arizona.
Yeah, well, I guess the warbird involvement started out, I grew up in the suburbs of Minneapolis, and I started working as a volunteer in high school for Bob Pond's Air Museum up in Eden Prairie, Minnesota, which was at that time called the Plains Fame East. And just kept doing that, just kind of on the ground volunteering, and then wound up going to school and getting my private license. And after college, kind of working on my civilian ratings, and then wound up getting the opportunity to go fly in the Air Force, which was awesome. And so did 10 years active duty in the Air Force, and then transitioned over to the reserves as a part-time reservist out at Luke Air Force Base, and started at my airline at that time and started working. And so I got the airline thing going on. And while I was stationed active duty up in Salt Lake City at Hill Air Force Base, they had a small Commemorative Air Force unit up there. And I started flying with them, and they had a steerman. So I started flying the steerman with them. And then once I moved to Phoenix, I started flying with the Arizona group of the Commemorative Air Force, and just kind of went from there. So it's been a lot of fun, and I've been extremely lucky to be able to do a lot of the stuff that I've been able to do.
So in your Air Force background, you were primarily flying fighters, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, just the F-16 was the only operational aircraft I flew. So flew the T-37 and the T-38 in training, but the F-16 for the rest of my career.
Okay. So this is a little bit of a tangent, but we have a lot of listeners that are current military pilots, and they are looking to transition over after their military commitments are done over to the major airlines. And if you're comfortable, would you mind sharing kind of what your experience was doing that? And did you find that it was a difficult transition to switch from an F-16 to a narrow body airplane? Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, especially as a single seat fighter guy. That's what I think that would be the hardest transition, right?
Yeah, well, it is, just because you're going to a crew concept, and in the military flying fighters, you still have somewhat of a crew concept because you're working within your flight. So it's just everybody's in a different cockpit, but you're still working together and exercising CRM, if you will. It's just, the way I'd put it in an airline context. But yeah, it is a mental adjustment to kind of go to a crewed aircraft like that. For me, I was already flying the B-17 in the CAF at that point. So I had had a little taste of it, which was helpful for me in the transition. But I would say for most people, it takes a short while before you kind of transition to like, all right, I got to share this airplane with somebody who's, my captain. And it's a pretty quick transition, I think, for most people. I don't know if there's too much you can really do before you get there, but I would say most fighter folks are very used to working as a team.
Right.
And you're just sitting a lot closer together once you get to the airline.
That's well said. Now, were you the guy in new hire class when they were talking about your airplane where you're like, well, on the B-17, we do it a little bit differently?
No. Although, make sure you tell people how cool you were in your former life.
There's always that guy.
Always makes friends.
Exactly.
Start out strong on day one.
When they have you give you a brief bio, but you just rattle on for 5 minutes, that gets a little weird.
Yeah.
Did I mention that I flew fighters?
Yeah.
If not, let me tell you.
Yeah, let me tell you. And then how long, usually the second leg of a trip where then your hands are out and you're showing you were...
You're shooting your watch? Yeah, of course.
I love it. Well, for today's discussion, we would talk about the CAF. And I guess step one, when we were talking to you before, was like, wait, CAF, what does that stand for? Commemorative Air Force? Can you talk a little bit about what the CAF is, how it started, and where it is now? So the Commemorative Air Force is a national organization, actually kind of an international organization. We've got a couple of international chapters as well. But it was a group that was founded in the late 50s. By a group of crop dusters, basically, down in South Texas, who had flown training airplanes and done kind of some, side jobs and stuff like that during World War II, and they wanted to fly fighters. So they kind of banded together and pooled their funds together and bought a P-51 Mustang. And it kind of grew from there to where they started picking up other airplanes, and they realized that most of these airplanes had been, melted down after the war or kind of chopped up and turned into pots and pans or sold to other air forces, and they were gone. Crashed in Greenland, exactly. So a lot of these were just gone. They kind of looked around and realized that they wanted to come up with a complete set of basically what they could get of World War II airplanes to kind of perpetuate the memory of these airplanes during World War II and what they had accomplished and what they had done. And so they went from there. It was actually chartered as a nonprofit in 1961. It's been since then. So it's been a going concern since then. It's grown to almost 13,000 members in that time. I think we've got close to 80 discrete organizations or little subchapters within the national organization. So it's just kind of taken off, which it's really cool because it's a way for people to just kind of go out and get involved on the local level with whatever their local chapter is. And that's why it's so important and why it's kind of maintained its prominence and why it's such a big, in my opinion, important warbird organization is because people can really get involved at kind of whatever level they want to.
So
or they're
I'm on the website right now and looking at the fleet of how many airplanes. Dylan, just take a guess. How many airplanes do you think they have? Okay. Like as a like total, or are we breaking it down by like bombers or total? Okay. I'm going to say, let's see, you said there's 70 located. I'm going to say 120. 174, it says. That's a lot of airplanes. That's a lot of engines. That's a lot of motor oil you're going through.
It's
crazy. It's not all what comes to mind. It's not T6s and T28s and Stearmans and a couple of B-17s. There's a lot of different airplanes. A lot. So many. When you look at the scale of it, that's a heck of a organization to run and to fund and to maintain all these airplanes. It's crazy. Can you just kind of give us an idea of how it works operationally?
So originally, the pilots kind of sponsored them, and then it was just kind of run through either donations or people sponsoring the aircraft. If you fly the airplanes, you sponsor the airplane, and it's a different dollar amount for each type of airplane that you're going to fly. So it kind of started out that way. And now, especially for the bigger groups like Arizona or Georgia or the B-29, B-24 group, we generally take the airplanes out on tour to air shows or out to tour stops where we'll just kind of do some advertising and then show up and let people tour through the airplanes. And we have T-shirts and other things for sale. And we do rides in the airplanes. In a certain subset of the airplanes, we do rides. So people can come for a living history flight experience. And that all supports the airplane. So there's not really a huge national endowment or anything like that supports all this. So it's volunteers going out and selling T-shirts and selling rides and doing all that keeps all this going.
But the airplanes that actually generate revenue, that revenue is shared amongst the whole organization, or is that to keep that airplane flying?
To a certain extent, yep. So a share goes to the national organization, which is then used for operations. The whole operation is a nonprofit. It's a 501c3 organization. A certain amount goes to national, and national will take care of that. The rest of it stays with the local unit that does the operation of the aircraft.
One question I had is kind of the last of the greatest generation that actually fought in World War II. There's only a few left. So
yes.
Was it started by folks that were mostly fighting in World War II and veterans of World War II, and then it's kind of been passed down to the next generation? What's that like?
Yeah, it is. And we've had a number of World War II vets at both of actually all three of the museums that I've kind of been associated with or worked with over the years. And they are very few and far between at this point. But yeah, the original founders of the Commemorative Air Force were, they had worked in the U.S. Army Air Forces during World War II. But it drew in people from pretty much anywhere, whether they were civilians who wanted to get involved with perpetuating the history and help out. But I would say the core at the beginning certainly was veterans. And it's always been kind of a strong backbone of who's come out and subsequently volunteered. A lot of retired guys, certainly in Arizona, we have a lot of retirees who come out. But I would say it's about half and half at this point between veterans and non-veterans who just want to come out and help out. They see the mission is important and it's a worthwhile use of their time, and they come out and help out however they can.
So why don't you tell us what you specifically do for the CAF, what airplanes you fly?
So for Arizona, the Airbase Arizona, we've got 7 airplanes, CAF airplanes that we fly. The B-17, we have a B-25, C-47, C-45, which is a twin beach, and T-6 Stearman, PT-17, or actually this one's an N-2S because it was a Navy airplane, same airplane, just different designation. And then we have a Champ, a 7ECA Champ. I fly the B-17. I fly everything but the C-45. I just kind of stay involved as I can. We do fly the C-47, B-25, and B-17, as well as the smaller airplanes, the Stearman and the T-6 in ride flights. So living history flight exemption or living history flight experience rides. Whether or not the bombers will go out on tour during the summer. So the B-17 and B-25 go out on tour, and they kind of tour around generally between June, July, August, maybe September, because, flying in Arizona is no fun at that point in airplanes with no air conditioning. Right. So we get out of town and take them on the road. All winter long, we generally fly the smaller airplanes and give rides on that. So yeah, that's generally how I stay. I either given ride flights out on tour with the airplanes once they're out on tour, or here back in Arizona, either with training, because we do a lot of training when we're back here in the winter, and then also with ride flights here back in Arizona during the winter.
Okay, so I'm guessing like day one, you don't show up and say, hey, I flew F-16s and throw me the keys to the B. I'll figure it out. Like, how do they train somebody to fly an airplane like the B-17? Do they have the original manual still? Like, what's that process getting checked out on one of those airplanes?
Yeah, it generally, it's kind of tailored to each person because the FAA doesn't have a syllabus for it. I mean, obviously you have to pass. It's a type rated airplane. So there is a type certificate for the airplane. So you do have to pass a type rating ride to be able to fly the airplane. The way we do it is you just kind of show up. And if you're one of those people who flew Twin Beaches for freight or DC-3s, flying night freight or something like that, and just haven't done it in a while, it's probably going to be a fairly short checkout process because you got the relevant experience.
Right.
For somebody like me who really didn't, it took a long time. So I started out, I showed up to Arizona being current in the Stearman, which is very helpful because it's tailwheel time. So I checked out in the Champ, and they figured out that I wasn't probably going to break that airplane. So then I got checked out in the T-6 and flew T-6 for a couple of years before I started flying the B-17. And the Twin Beach, did some training in the Twin Beach with some of our instructors, and then moved into the right seat in the B-17. And you just do kind of an apprenticeship program, really. So you fly right seat in the airplane. And then eventually, if you have the time and the talent and all that kind of stuff, you probably move over into the left seat and just go from there. But it all kind of depends on what your abilities and talents are and what kind of background you have. But if you've got all that, there's a path forward for you. It just takes a little longer or a little shorter, depending on what you used to do.
And then to stay current and qualified on all those different airplanes you listed that you fly, do you have to do a check ride every year for those? What's the ongoing training?
We do. Most guys tend to kind of concentrate on different ones. I fly mostly the B-25. I'm not flying the B-17 this year just because we're going to be busy with other stuff in the Arizona group. So I'm just going to concentrate on that. But otherwise, you try to sign up. And we try very hard to kind of schedule our guys and gals. If you have a certain number of ride flights set up, you're just trying to rotate through so everybody flies the airplane fairly often. So you're not doing a long layoff and then coming back to it. But if you have to, you just go and fly the airplane and go out and get current. So it is a challenge, usually not during the summer because we fly the airplane every week or every weekend, I should say. So the summer is pretty easy to maintain currency. But during the winter, sometimes it can be.
So who comes out to give you a B-17 type ride, check ride? Like, is that an FAA resource or?
There's a number of DPEs, and I can't remember what the other designation is, but there's a number of people who are designated by the FAA to come out and do examining in the aircraft. And we have one guy who's on our staff. So most of the time we're flying with our guy. He's very good, obviously. But otherwise, you just kind of have the network. It's kind of a small community, so you know who everybody is. And you just, you call somebody up. If you need to bring somebody in, you call somebody up to do check rides.
I need a B-17 contract.
They're pretty full up.
Weekend. Wow.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, the variety of aircraft that the Arizona Airbase has. Do these airplanes sort of, when you get together, you go, what would be great is if we could find, X airplane. Let's go see if we can find it or restore one. Or is it like, we found this one, we're going to do it because it's in our backyard. Talk a little bit about how the fleet is comprised and how you get these airplanes.
Yeah, well, it kind of goes back a long way. So the B-17, most of the airplanes were kind of donated, quite honestly. So, and quite a long time ago, but not all. I think as we go further, a lot of stuff is, as we get further down the road with the organization, it's getting to the point now where the airplanes have a lot more value than they did 50 years ago. So if you want to chase another type, you're probably going to have to buy it. But the B-17 was bought as our B-17 was surplused in the late 50s and was a fire bomber for 20 years with the Aero Union out of Chico, California. So it fought fires for 20 years after it left the Air Force. And so it was a stripped down, it was pretty beat up when we got it. And this was long before my time, obviously. In 1979, it was donated to the wing. The B-25 was donated to the wing and flown in right around 1980 and did a 28-year restoration in the back of the hangar. A lot of the other airplanes were kind of donated or bought at kind of cut rate prices if they were even bought. But a lot of them were donated, when they needed some work. We did purchase the Stearman and we purchased the C-47 as well.
Hold on.
So,
did you say a 28-year restoration?
Mm-hmm.
Like the airplane did not fly for 28 years undergoing restoration?
Oh, yeah. The B-25 came in and it was rough. Apparently, this was obviously long before I showed up, but it showed up and kind of barely made it to Arizona. And it went back into the back of the hangar and they pulled it all apart and it took a little more than 25 years.
So is that all volunteer
to actually get the airplane restored?
You're a pilot, you volunteer as a pilot. Is that all volunteer mechanics that work at airlines or wherever around town, and that's that end of it, and they help restore it?
Yeah. And not even, you had a core of mechanics who were really kind of supervising all the work, but volunteers, I turned a few screws on it, putting panels back on or stuff like that. But yeah, it was a very dedicated crew. And I would say the last 5 or 6 years were really where it kind of kicked back in. And we had a group of people who showed up into the group who really wanted to get this done. So they kind of took ownership of it and pushed it through and got the airplane done and flying again. So, but it took a long, long time. So the aircraft is called Made in the Shade, which is a joke because it's, it was in the back of the hangar in the shade for so long. It was the Made in the Shade, the back of the hangar. So, but it's a great airplane. They did a great job.
Can you imagine being the crew that had to fly the first flight after 28 years, and you're just like, oh man, I hope everything goes good.
Yeah,
We put so much time and energy into this.
I can sympathize with that a little bit. After that was kind of what the first flight of my airplane was like. I was like, oh boy.
Yeah, I was there for the day that it flew, and other guys that flew it, and at that point it had been run and taxied, and everything was.
Yeah,
they had a pretty good idea that it was going to be a good airplane. So, and it was a great flight.
It's got to be hard on those airplanes too to trade, like in the B-25. For recurrent, right? I assume there's a single engine approach in there, right? So you pull a motor and then you go, push the prop up and you're ripping around the pattern with the it's got to be hard on those old airplanes. Like,
It is.
does the training put a lot of wear on them compared to just when you tour around the country and just cruising around, right?
It does. Yeah, it does. And we do a full 6158 ride on them. So it's 4 approaches and it's the whole basically the whole ATP profile. And so, yeah, we're doing approaches, we're doing single engine landing and so on and so forth. So you just kind of adjust the procedures to put as little wear on the engines, especially the engines, because a lot of what goes into flying warbirds is taking care of these engines, because they're old and they're just different than a flat inline reciprocating engine. The radials they're just a little different ball of wax. And so, yeah, you just use procedures that have kind of come out through the years to baby these. You go to a 0 thrust setting rather than scrubbing the power completely off like they used to in the Air Force days. So we go to like 15 inches and 1500 RPM and kind of let it run at a 0 thrust setting. And that keeps a little bit of heat on the engine, doesn't let the prop drive the engine, which is not good for a radial. You'd make adjustments that get the training objective done, but try to put as little wear and tear as possible on the airplane.
So you have to fly 4 approaches. So you're insinuating that all of these airplanes are IFR certified and you guys maintain IFR currency so you can fly them IFR when you're out on the road?
We do.
And is that just the bombers or is that everything?
No, that's just the bombers and the DC-3. They're C-47. So
That's crazy.
Well, they never used to. And when I first showed up, we only flew the airplanes VFR. And the FAA and the CAF and a bunch of other operators realized that this was kind of stupid. So if anything, it's just going to encourage, especially when you're out on tour, it's just going to encourage scud running and stuff like that. So there's a much safer way to do things. And that's just to maintain IFR currency and keep the airplanes IFR certified. And so we do. And it's by far the safer way to do things.
Okay, let's talk about the panel in the bombers especially. Or is it mostly original instruments? Have you had to do some upgrades? What are these? What does it look like when you're sitting in the cockpit?
No, we've done, especially the avionics upgrades. We run, so the B-17 has a G5. Actually, I think we have 2 G5s on it this year. So 2 G5s, a Garmin 430W, and modern transponder and radios and so on and so forth. And that airplane, it's the worst cross-check I've ever had to deal with. It's terrible. There's stuff everywhere. The instruments used to be kind of in the middle. The big ADI used to be in the middle, big artificial horizon. We still have it, still works, but we, the G5s that are right in front of the left seat, there's stuff everywhere. It's a terrible cross check. The B-25 is better. There's kind of more of a 6-pack kind of right in front of the left seat, the pilot there. And we also have the same radio stack. So 430W, C-47 is the same thing. We have a couple of G5s and 430 and modern Garmin radios. You have to. If you're operating as much as we do in the airspace system, you just have to have updated stuff.
Right.
Do you guys have modern engine monitors? My airplane has a radial, old technology, but I have modern engine monitoring on every cylinder and everything. Do you guys have that on those as well?
Yeah, we don't. So it's one of those things that we kind of like to incorporate if we could, but especially with the 14-cylinder stuff, gets cost prohibitive. To try to custom design something.
Oh, Garmin doesn't make a 14-cylinder?
I know they do 9-cylinder stuff for the. It's a possibility. I think the EAA put them their B-17, and I have not talked to any of their folks about what kind of good data they pull off of them and whether or not they think it's a worthwhile investment.
It's probably kind of nice, honestly. Too much information stresses you out sometimes. Like I have one cylinder that runs hot, and I'm always worried about it, and it's all. It'd be nice just to have, one CHT they put on one of the ones that runs cooler, and then you just in blissful ignorance and you don't worry about it. I'm always like, oh God, that one cylinder.
Too much to think. Right? Ignorance is bliss.
Yeah,
hopefully.
Exactly.
But, these airplanes. I've found that the airplane will talk to you. The engine will talk to you. If you're kind of listening to what it's doing out there, it gives you a lot of visual cues. And even with the limited information that we have with the instrumentation that came on the airplane, original and stock, if you just pay attention to whether it's shaking a little bit or, what kind of exhaust it's putting out of the stack or something, they'll talk to you if you pay attention.
Yeah. People told me that before I started flying behind a radio, and they're like, yeah, they'll talk to you and they'll give you a lot of warning, and they'll run for a long time with something truly wrong, like one cylinder truly out of service.
Right.
And it will run surprisingly well for a surprisingly long time, but you do have to kind of listen to it because it will give you a lot of clues before things really go wrong. I mean, it's kind of interesting. You do learn that after time in the seat. It was weird. And then I had my prop balanced, and then it was like a whole new thing because it just sounded and felt different until you learn how it is now. But
it just runs differently.
Though. You can kind of figure that out. And then if you have the the engine data recorded to correlate it back. I'm like, God, that sounded weird. And I knew when it was, and I had gone back and looked and seen like, what happened. So I don't know. They're weird beasts, hard to start, but kind of fun.
Yeah.
Keeps it interesting.
It does that.
Oh, yeah. How do you start a 14-cylinder radial engine?
Well, where to start? I mean, is it cold? Is it hot? Is it humid? Is it a hot start? Is it a cold start? I always say it's an art form. It really kind of is. Yeah, how much prime is too much prime? I have no idea. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't work. For the most part, you really do kind of develop your own techniques just through time and experience. And like the B-17 starts very differently than the B-25, which starts very differently from the C-47. And they're all kind of similarly designed engines, but it's weird. They're all different. It's part of the fun when it goes right. And it's part of the extreme frustration when it doesn't go right. You've got like, a bunch of people sitting back there taking a ride and you kind of look back and they're all looking at you like, really?
Yeah.
Why can't you start the engine?
At least one of these will start, guys.
The B-25 is actually fairly easy to start. The B-17 is pretty easy to start. The C-47 gives me fits. I don't know. Other guys can do it. They just have the right touch.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. When you see how quickly and easily the engine can start, when you figure out what the pinnacle is of how it can be done, and then everything is like trying to zero in on that. And I'm like, oh, it doesn't start right away. I'm like, well, I must have overprimed it. So then you open the throttle a little bit more to get some more air in there, and then it's like, boom. And then you got to snatch it back so you don't run, it's a whole thing. I think it's fun now. It's like,
it's a dance.
It's like, all right, let's see if we can figure this out today.
Yeah, I remember the first couple of times we started that engine was not so much fun.
Exactly. We have it on video, remember? It was a lot of smoke, a lot of the air bottle, the reef.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Now, this is a dumb question because I don't know anything about radials. I'm not an expert like you guys. Max's radial, he has to use compressed air to turn it.
Yeah.
Is it the same on the bombers or is it electrical or like how do you even get it turning?
It's a direct drive electrical starter on everything we've got right now. During the war, a lot of them used a flywheel. A lot of times you'll get in there and you'll see it engage in a mesh switch and they'll be separate. So the mesh would start the flywheel spinning. So there'd be an electrical starter in there that would spin the flywheel. That was a spinning mass in the back of the engine case. And then the mesh would actually engage, it would have a clutch that engaged that flywheel, that spinning flywheel. So if you ever hear a T6 where it sounds like it's spinning up, it's got this really kind of high pitched noise and it's spinning up. And then the prop starts when it engages. That's an old inertial starter. But on the big engines, those are gone. It's all direct drive stuff.
To drive that many cylinders, the starter's got to be the size of a freaking 5-gallon bucket. Like
the flywheel had to have been huge. Yep.
Wow.
The one that cracked me up is Navy airplanes on carriers used to have a shotgun starter. So it was called a Kaufman starter. And it was basically like a shotgun shell sized cartridge that you'd put into this starter. And then it would fire the cartridge and it would basically be like a compressed air starter at that point, except for it would be from the expanding gases from the shell starter. So they'd actually have to carry these like shotgun shell things and they would give you, I don't know, 10 seconds of cranking or something like that, probably less than that. So you just hoped it started. But apparently it was nice and light.
I guess. You mentioned like if you think about the art of starting this engine and then think about like they're trying to do this in wartime with people with probably very little training. They're just throwing these guys into bombers. Like in your mind, you never really think about what it would be like at a base to watch these things launch. Half the time, probably guys are just trying to get the motor started.
Yeah. And apparently you paid attention to your crew chief because you had a mechanic who was assigned to that airplane and we still do it today. That tradition hasn't changed. You listen to the guy or gal who knows the airplane and you take their advice on how to start the airplane. And usually it goes much better that way. They always had spares. So, which actually hasn't changed in the Air Force today. So there's usually a couple people that are designated spares. And if they couldn't start the engines, then you sent the spare.
When you take these airplanes on the road all summer, how on earth do you maintain them or haul that much straight single weight oil around? Like, how do you keep it running through the summer away from base?
So we, at least in our organization, we have trailers. So we bring the T-shirts to sell and so on and so forth. We also have a stock of parts. They're fairly common use or wear parts. So we've got those available to us. We generally fly with an A&P mechanic, almost always. It's very rare that we don't have an A&P with us on the road. And usually at that case, we have a full set of documentation, maintenance documentation. So we carry the full set of maintenance documentation on the iPad and then usually a paper copy as well. So if there's a local A&P who can help us out with doing something, they have the documentation available to do stuff. But it's usually the volunteers that we bring. We always have at least one volunteer, even if they don't have an A&P, who's very well versed on the maintenance aspects of the airplane.
Okay.
So, and the oil thing, actually, that's a really good question about the oil. So we have the truck, we have two big, heavy duty 3/4 ton trucks, basically pickup trucks that pull the trailers. And we have oil tanks on the back of those. So we get oil. If we need oil, we have a barrel shipped out and delivered to wherever the stop's going to be. And then we just fill up the oil tank on the truck, keep it going that way. But yeah, it's a logistical exercise. You're trying to just keep track of all your consumables and make sure that you get the right thing to the right place to keep it going.
Let's take a quick break from our conversation with Pete. Talk about our friend Tim Pope. When it comes to financial planning, he's got your back so you can focus on the mission ahead. Timothy P. Pope is a certified financial planner helping professional pilots design and execute smart financial planning strategies from retirement planning and investment management to military transition and tax planning. He's your financial planning partner. Timothy P. Pope, helping professional pilots make the most out of life. Okay, it's one thing to have like consumables and have volunteer labor. Where do you get parts when something goes wrong? Like, I mean, they're not making these parts anymore. How in the heck do they keep all these airplanes maintained?
Well, it depends on the part. So we've been operating this B-17 for, 40, 50 some years now. So over that time, we've kind of built up a stock of parts. A lot of stuff can be manufactured. Some of these airplanes, the B-25 specifically, the P-51 is kind of famous for the fact that it was designed and built to be easily maintained and easily manufactured. So a lot of the stuff is available. If it's an airframe part or something like that, you can actually get stuff made. You can make stuff up if it's just sheet metal stuff. If it's a forging or a casting, then that's a whole different problem. So a lot of that stuff, some of it can be made, some of it is made. A lot of stuff we have kind of in stock from 50 years worth of collecting parts and having parts donated. And there was actually a B-17 firebomber operator at Falcon Field here in Mesa, which is where the aircraft is based. And so there was stuff that was donated when they shut that down back in the late 70s. So you kind of hope you have the part in stock. If you don't, there's actually a B-17 co-op. So all the operators of the B-17s meet once a year. So they send representatives in and have a meeting. And if you need to do a tire order, or if somebody needs a part or something like that, there's usually somebody who has one that can sell it to you or trade it to you or loan it to you. The operators work fairly well together just to kind of share what's going on with the community and maybe maintenance problems that they've seen or best practices that they've seen in the community.
So let me ask you this: 100 years from now, do you think warbirds will still be operating? Certain airframes, maybe not all of them. Do you think there's a path to that?
Yeah, I think that there would be, especially as manufacturing technology like 3D printing gets more sophisticated and stuff like that. I think that there is a path forward with that. That the real question 100 years down the road is whether you can still making compatible hydrocarbon gas, fuels. And that's really kind of for the whole community. That's kind of, something that's looming is if they stop making leaded fuel, how is that going to affect radial engine operation and stuff like that? Is there a way forward through that? So I think that there would be. I think that you're not going to see it as widespread as it is today. I think it's going to keep kind of ramping down as availability of fuel, insurance concerns, availability of parts, some of the really complicated parts that they just, that are very, very challenging and not very cost effective to make. But some of the smaller stuff, especially like Stearman's, T6s, where there's a lot of parts out there. There's a strong aftermarket. P-51s, there's actually a pretty strong aftermarket, except for maybe in the Merlin engine world. I could see this going forward. Right?
That was my next question. If you had to pick one warbird that you think has the longest staying power just because of that access to parts, everything else, do you think it would be like Stearman P-51 or something like that is probably good?
Let us guess first before Pete answers. My guess would be the C-47, the DC-3.
Think so?
Because they actually still use those in revenue generating cargo operations and all kinds of stuff.
I think that I would think P-51.
All right, Pete, go ahead.
I think both of those are great choices. I would say the Stearman and the T6 are also strong contenders, just because there's so much demand still for those airframes. They're so iconic, they're so legendary, and there's so much demand for them. And so many of them were saved after the war because they were useful, even in a civilian context, that there's still a lot of parts and aftermarket support for all those airplanes. Basler's still making parts in Wisconsin for the C-47, the DC-3.
That's crazy.
So
I would think the hardest is probably the B-29. That was one of the most complex World War II aircraft built. Like, it's pressurized and has, all kinds of stuff. And there's just how many flying of those?
2.
And you guys have one of them or both of them?
There's 2. There's Doc in Wichita and then Fifi, just the CAF airplane.
Yeah. And so that seems, would you agree? Is that probably the hardest one to keep going?
Yeah, I would put it up. I think there's probably other airplanes that are challenging. Some of the British airplanes that would be challenging to keep flying at a kind of cost-effective level over here anyway. Over in England, it might be easier to source parts and so on and so forth. But the B-29 is a large, complex, thirsty airplane.
So what part of the regulation do you guys operate under to be able to carry people for hire? Is it the exemption for sightseeing within 50 miles, or what do you guys? How do you operate these airplanes? And are they certified? Or are they experimental? Like, what's the deal?
Yeah, so all the airplanes are, even though some of them have type certificates like B-17, B-25, they're generally limited category. Our B-17 and the 25 are limited category. I know the Mustang is limited category as well. But we operate under an exemption to Part 91 to sell rides in limited and experimental category aircraft. And each operation will generally have their own exemption. Ours is, I think, exemption 6802 is specific to the Commemorative Air Force. And so we operate, and they renew that every year. And every aircraft is listed by tail number that we are authorized to give revenue rides, or revenue generation, or revenue operations, I should say. And so those specific airplanes, we can give revenue rides in as long as we comply with all of the limitations and the operation specifications that are in the exemption. And I want to say it's like a 12 or 15 page document that says how far we can go, what weather minimums we have to operate under, what the training requirements are, the requirements for the maintenance. We have to have a approved maintenance program for the aircraft. So, and each, the EAA has one for their airplanes. We have one for our airplanes. Other aircraft museums and organizations will have their own exemption.
So that's essentially like your operating certificate. If you were a Part 135 operator or whatever, it just basically says, here's the rules for your operations. Just you guys just operate under an exemption. And then, so you have like approved maintenance programs?
We do. So we do for the airplane. So we operate under our approved maintenance program, which is basically a phase, and it's for each airplane. It's different. I can't speak hugely intelligently to it off the top of my head, but all this stuff is run through the local FSDO and then through the FSDO, the controlling FSDO for the whole national organization. So, but it's tight. Look through it. We've got some really dedicated folks who did that stuff for a living with the airlines and in their civilian jobs, who've kind of gone through it and keep all that stuff tight on inspections and everything. It's pretty impressive.
So do you guys operate like in the cockpit, especially in the bombers and the multi-pilot crew airplanes, kind of like the airline with checklists and flows and all of that? Does it kind of mirror what we do at work?
Very, very similar to the way we operate in the airline. And the guys who put our stuff together in Arizona were airline guys, generally with America West or with Southwest back in the day. It's very similar to the way things are done right now. And it's exactly the way we do things. That's the way we train. It's the way we do our yearly training requirements too. And we actually go out, sit in the cockpit, and obviously there's no simulators for the airplane. So we do all of our training in the aircraft. But we spend a lot of time working kind of one-on-one with each other and as instructors working with our newer guys to get them to the point where they're familiar and comfortable with the flows before we go out and fly in the airspace. I think it's a pretty good gig.
Listening to you talk about this, Pete, makes me very comfortable. Like, I would want to go fly in one of these airplanes. I think kind of just looking on the sidelines before, I was like, wow, riding in the back of this would be exciting, but also like, how does that work? How do they maintain this? But I feel a lot better, like learning about some of the processes you guys do. It's got to be so rewarding to be taking people for a ride on a vintage aircraft like that. Can you tell us what that experience is like as the pilot, being able to share that with somebody for the first time, and then talk about kind of what those experiences look like as a passenger. Are you sitting in a cockpit? Where are you? Kind of run us through what that all looks like.
Well, for our aircraft, so the aircraft that I'm involved with in Arizona is, so the B-17, we have 2 seats up in the nose. So you're sitting either in the nose section, which is the navigator and bombardier seats, or you're sitting kind of aft of the bomb bay, which is kind of behind the wing in the radio room and then in the waist section. Our B-25 has a couple of seats that are up in the cockpit with us. It's right after the pilot seats in the compartment that's right underneath where the turret is. And then we have some that are in the back of the aircraft as well. Some of the other airplanes, the C-47 it's actually our C-47 is a corporate conversion. So it was actually the corporate airplane for Hoover Vacuum in the 60s. So it was a military aircraft. It actually saw military service in the Mediterranean, and then it came back and it was sold to civilian service. So that one's actually a lot of fun to ride in because it's all Mad Men back there. It's pretty cool. It's 1960s, pretty swank. But and then the smaller airplanes, obviously in the Stearman and the T6, those are you're in the back cockpit in the T6, you're in the front cockpit in the Stearman, and that's you got a stick. You're basically in the instructor's cockpit at that point. So they're kind of cool. You are able to see the operations in the B-25 certainly, and in the smaller airplanes, it's a lot of fun to take pilots flying because they kind of see what's going on. They kind of see what's happening and how the differences are to whatever they're flying. But for other passengers, to answer your first question, it is very rewarding. A lot of these people have personal connections to the airplane. They had family members who flew them during the war, or grandpa, or dad, or they had moms who worked on them in the factories. And so they're kind of connecting with that. And to make that happen to where people can see, it's a little window kind of back in time, if you will. And being able to give people that experience, obviously it's fun to be able to take a ride in an old airplane just because it's cool. They have big windows. They're a different experience. You're down, fairly low. We're only a couple thousand feet up. So it's not like in an airliner where you can't see anything. And it's one, I think it's a good experience in general. And two, in so many cases, we're kind of providing an opportunity for people to get in touch with their personal history with their family and stuff like that. And it's hugely rewarding. It's an awful lot of fun. So, and being able to take time a little bit afterwards to hear their stories and hear their stories about their dad. Nowadays, it's very rare for us to take World War II veterans, although that used to be a lot more common, where we'd actually have a veteran on the flight with us. And being able to hear them, so many times they'd get on the airplane and their mind went back 50, 60 years. And it was just like they remembered where everything was. They remembered all the procedures. It was amazing. It was a very, very rewarding experience.
So, okay. Now, if you're like me, you're listening to this and you're going, I want to go do this. I know in Arizona, there's some opportunities. Talk about those opportunities at your base, and then maybe kind of some other cool opportunities that the CAF has in some of the other parts of the country.
Yeah. So for Airbase Arizona here in the Phoenix suburbs out in Mesa, the nice thing about us is it's a fairly big organization. So if you want to come out and get involved as a museum docent, since we're open on the weekends as a museum, we have about 25 or 26 airplanes in the hangar. So we can come out and see that. A lot of memorabilia as well. So you can either show people around, you can come out and work as a maintenance guy. You can come out and help out with the physical plant of the building. Come out as a historian, kind of help out with the historical artifacts and help with the historical artifacts. If you're qualified and you want to come out as a pilot, you can come out and start working on that as well. There's an awful lot of work to be done at kind of all levels of the museum experience. And we're always looking for people to come out. You're not getting paid for real, but there's a great deal of satisfaction in being able to contribute to the mission and do this stuff. Like I said, we're a bigger organization. There are smaller organizations in the CAF. Some of our units are one airplane. It's a T hangar or something like that, but it's a good group of people, and they're still doing the same thing, just on a smaller local level, where they're showing the aircraft off. They're maybe bringing people out for tours of their airplane. They're going out to air shows and kind of spreading the word and so on and so forth. So there's a ton of opportunities, kind of depending on what the closest organization is to you. And the way to do that is just go check out the website, which is commemorativeairforce.org. And just look on. There's actually a little site finder that'll tell you what the closest thing is to you for the CAF. And quite honestly, if you don't live close to a CAF wing, but there is a local air museum or something like that, or organization that does this stuff, just go out and ask them. Show up, pound on the door, or look at their website, or call them up and just see if they need folks. And most of them are very welcoming. for volunteer labor, and they could always use the help. So
Yeah, and that's go back to your other question, Dylan. For the next 100 years of these airplanes, that's the only way this works
Right.
is with a lot of volunteer
Very
labor,
true.
because these airplanes are very expensive to operate and to feed and to everything else. That takes all of the resources, any revenue that's generated, right? I mean, it's just so you have to have the people
it does.
and the time, because they also require a lot of time. The whole thing
Yeah.
requires a lot of man hours to keep going.
That's very true. It's all kind of driven on the passion of the volunteers. So
And which is also fostered with the museum and the rides, and that kind of keeps the whole machine going. I kind of feel like that maybe people,
it does.
hits a nerve and then they come and show up and volunteer their time. So
If I go do a ride, I'm not going to say that I have like any specific history with a specific airframe or anything like that. But just as a pilot, what do you think would be the most interesting warbird to go for a ride on? If you had to pick one thing to recommend, what would it be?
P-51, next question.
Yeah.
The Mustang's awesome.
Yeah.
I really can't argue with that. If you just want to get the pinnacle, what I would consider the pinnacle of World War II experience, go for a ride in the Mustang.
Okay. What about for a bomber experience? Like kind of different. Like
For a bomber,
yeah.
if you want to see kind of the operational aspect and kind of see, how the airplane was operated, the B-25 is great because you're going to be able to see the takeoff, the start, how the pilot's going to operate the aircraft. And then you can go up into the nose, at least in our airplane. Once we're up in the air, you can go up into the nose for a while so you can get the experience of riding up in the nose, the glass nose of the airplane. So that's cool.
Wow.
I think as a pilot, that's a lot of value added just because you kind of see a little bit of everything, kind of the way the airplane is operated. And then you get to just get up in the nose and go look around and go, oh man, this is cool. It's just it's an experience you're not going to get really anyplace else. Being able to ride up in the
I
nose.
think that's what I would
And
pick.
and the B-17 is the same way. You sit up in the bombardier seat and your toes are hanging out kind of over nothing. And there's nothing between you and out there except for this plexiglass bubble that you're sitting behind. I don't think you can go wrong.
Is there a bomb sight in any of the bombers where you can look through?
There is a bomb sight. I honestly can't remember if you can look through it or whether we've got everything set up to where you can look through. But the bomb sights are in the airplane.
Is there ever can you load the bomb bay with bags of flour and then use the Norden bomb sight and be so cool?
There was another organization, I think it was Collings Foundation, that I think they kind of loaned their airplane or leased their airplane out to this organization. They'd have what they call the bomber weekend. So they actually did get permission to do that. So they're out, who knows where, probably up by where they do Burning Man and stuff like that, where there's absolutely nobody. And they did. They went out and had these little, they actually dropped little plastic bombs or whatever out of the airplane and got to shoot the 50 caliber with blanks. That would be kind of cool. We've never done anything like that. That's a little varsity level for the way we want to operate the airplane. But there used to be an opportunity to do that. Who knows? Somebody might come up with doing that again someday.
So cool.
Can you organize that for us, Pete? Because I really want to shoot the 50 cal and drop the bombs out on the Wilcox Playa or somewhere. There's a nice big dry lake bed out there, by Cochise.
That would be fun. I don't think we're ever going to do it with ours.
What's it like to fly the P-51 and something with that much power and torque? And you kind of hear some of the lore of flying that airplane. And if you do a go around and you just add all the throttle at once, will it actually flip you over on your back? And is that the end? Just tell us what it's like to fly
It's
that.
cool. It's a cool airplane. You always kind of think that an airplane's going to be really kind of fun and cool to fly, and it lives up to the hype. It's loud. It's powerful. It responds extremely well. They just did a great job building that airplane, and it does live up to the hype. It's a neat airplane. It's not all that challenging, I would say. If you're good at flying T6, builds very easily onto that experience. They built the airplane to be fairly easy to fly for a fairly low time pilot. It was a design objective for the aircraft to be able to accomplish the mission effectively with somebody who had about 250 to 300 hours, of appropriate training going out and flying. And they'd go out and fly 6 to 8 hours over Germany or over Japan to accomplish their mission. So the airplane is pretty intelligently designed for that. It's got the big wide landing gear. It's got a steerable tail wheel. A lot of the factors that make it more of a challenging airplane have been kind of designed out of it. But anytime you have that much power, that big of a prop, you have a lot of gyroscopic effects, you have torque, you have a lot of P factor on the tail just due to the fact that it's a lot. It's kind of everything you do on tail wheels magnified times 10 or so. It's not a demanding airplane, I would say. It does have its handling challenges just due to the fact that you've got so much power, and where those kind of kick in is low speed, with a lot of power on the airplane. And that's where people tend to get themselves in trouble, down in the landing phase. If they're they're trying to do a low speed go around and you bring the power in extremely quickly. You can get to the point where the airplane will kind of just move itself around. And what happens more, and I've seen some papers that more intelligently discuss it, but rather than it being a torque effect to where it just kind of corkscrews around, it's a kind of a combination of gyroscopic effect and torque, and a little bit of where you get to the point where it just advances the right wing and the left wing, you're kind of slewing sideways to where you get the left wing going backwards a little bit. Before you kind of catch it, and that kind of feeds into it rolling over on its back. You'll depart controlled flight, and unfortunately, you're doing it very close to the ground, and it's gotten people into trouble in the past. It's a known characteristic, I would say, and there's some good, trainers. Stallion 51 down in Kissimmee, Florida. They go out and they train, and you'll do this up at 10,000 feet, and you'll kind of see what the airplane will do. It's an eye-opening demonstration, but if you have the altitude to deal with it, you pull power and just recover the airplane. It's not that big of a deal. The problem is that people have this happen close to the ground, and it becomes an issue. But for the most part, flying the airplane, it's a great crosswind airplane for a tail dragger. It's powerful. The engine is way more smooth than I would have ever guessed for being that big. I mean, it's a 27-liter engine. It's a really impressive airplane. You can see out of it. It handles great. People have a wonderful time in the back seat because you can see out of it the back seat. You can show them some cool fighter stuff and pull some Gs, and it's amazing. So it lives up to it. It lives up to the hype in my mind.
Well, yeah. I mean, you saw how happy Tom Cruise's girlfriend was at the end of Top Gun Maverick, sitting in the back. She was having a great time. It looked like a lot of fun.
It's very much a bucket list experience, I think, for people when we give rides in the airplane, when we give rides in our airplane.
Yeah.
So we get a lot of people who generally are a little older. They've been wanting to do this for a long time, and it lives up to the hype for them too. We rarely have a dissatisfied customer, and it's just very atmospheric. I don't know if you've ever listened to the airplane where you pull the power to land and it goes pop, 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 pop. You ever heard that? Kind of sounds like popcorn. When you pull power on it, you can hear it from the inside, and it's just like, ooh, that's cool. People usually remark on that.
That's so cool. That's so cool. How long is a flight? If you pay for a flight in a P-51, is that like half hour? Or?
Generally in the air from 20 to 25 minutes. So it's generally about a 45-minute experience by the time you get everybody strapped in, go out, take off, come back around and land. But so we offer either a 20-minute flight or a 40-minute flight. It's kind of your choice on whether you want to do. But generally, depending on traffic, 22 to 25 minutes is generally what it runs, which is just about right in my mind. You go out and kind of demonstrate the airplane's capabilities a little bit. People get a chance to look around and really experience it. It's not too long if it's a bumpy day or something like that. Sometimes you get a little bit of bumps down low, or it's a little warmer or something like that. So that tends to be kind of the sweet spot in my mind.
Makes sense.
So the airplane's liquid cooled, right?
It is.
Does that mean that is it easier to keep cool, like on the ground or while you're in flight or climbing or when it's hot out? Like, can you talk a little bit about that? I've always been interested.
It's a huge part of how you have to operate the airplane. Is keeping that airplane cool on the ground. In the air, it's almost a non-factor, quite frankly. Once you get going and get some air through the scoop, it cools down pretty quick and it stays cool. But anytime on the ground, like we were just in Titusville, Florida about a month ago doing a tour stop. And it was strong winds and a long taxi on the way back. And if you're downwind with a strong wind kind of blowing up the back of the airplane, you don't get a lot of flow through the radiator, and you'll get caught very, very fast. So a lot of times you'll just have to turn the airplane around, put it into the wind, put the power up to about 1,500 RPM and just let it cool down, and then turn back around and keep taxiing. So if it's warm and humid, it really cuts down on the cooling efficiency of the radiator, and you just have to take that into effect. You got to explain to ground that you have to stop and turn the airplane around, and they don't know what you're doing, but something you have to live with. But in the air, it's almost a non-event. It cools down very quickly. It's a very effective cooling system in the air.
We've been having this question on our show for the last few episodes. Some listener wrote in and they said, if you could snap your fingers and fly any airplane in history without any limitations, what would it be? And so you've spent so much time around warbirds and people that have flown warbirds and probably even different types of World War II aircraft. Is there one airplane, maybe it's not technically possible, but if it was possible, what would you want to fly?
Yeah, but he's also flown fighter jets and everything else. So you're talking about everything. What would you fly? Like everything.
I'd want to fly a Bearcat. a Grumman Bearcat, F8F Bearcat.
Oh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty high on the list.
Okay. And this is probably a dumb question. Is that even a possibility? Like, is there a flying Bearcat now?
It is. I think there's probably about 5 or 6 of them still flying. There's probably about 10 of them out there. So it is a possibility. It's kind of the pinnacle. That and the Hawker Sea Fury are kind of the pinnacle of piston-driven fighters. And it's always been something that I've wanted to fly pretty much forever. That and the Tiger Cat, which is the twin-engine Grumman. The museum I grew up working at had one of each of those, and that'd be pretty cool. So, but it's the way that I kind of grew up. That's stuff that I'd like to do. There's some other airplanes that are on the list. The F-86 would be really fun to fly as well. I don't know. What's yours?
Well, I have a 9-year-old son. It's funny. This is actually, I wanted to talk to you about this. I've always wondered, like, will the appeal of kind of these vintage warbirds as the generations change, will the appeal become less, right? Because there's less that people kind of associate with it. Like, oh, my father flew this or my grandfather flew it, kind of so on. And so I have a 9-year-old son who's really into aviation, and he absolutely loves warbirds and has no real connection to World War II or anything. But for some reason, he's fascinated by bombers. He was just down this weekend down in Mesa at the museum, and he just loves it for some reason. And so I think that's interesting that maybe somebody that has nothing really, no association with, there's just some type of draw to those types of aircraft for whatever reason. But his favorite airplane is the Martin Mariner. And so that big lake flying boat. And so that was my answer because he loves that thing so much. So it would be cool if we could go fly that thing, which is not possible because there aren't anymore. But so that was my answer. I can't remember what you said, Max.
I said something kind of lame, but it would be like an F-22 or F-35 or some sort of 5th generation fighter that just because I've never flown a fighter jet, I think that would be.
And Joel had a good answer too. I can't remember what it was.
Joel's answer, which I berated him for, I still am. He says, we go through this. He was after us too. We talk about all this. And now, Joel, after looking at the Commemorative Air Force and their 174 airplanes and all this, his answer was the PC-12.
Hey, Pete, what's your take on the Pilatus PC-12?
Yeah, that's enough. Dude.
As a dream airplane.
Here, they're great airplanes.
Listen, Joel, I'm going to just put you on notice. I am going to give you an opportunity to revise this answer. Not right now because I just can't handle it, but some point in the future. So just, think about it. Do some research, please. Something.
I do love the Tiger Cat. That is a good looking airplane.
It is.
Okay. Well, you're going to have to report back with us, Pete, after you go fly Bearcat. That would be really cool.
Oh, yeah. Be something.
Yeah, there's one in Camarillo, right? Is there any other ones in the CAF?
Nope, that's the only one in the CAF fleet.
Well, I heard you've achieved the rank of colonel at the CAF, so can you pull some strings to...
If everybody else wasn't one too, maybe. Could be somebody. But...
Okay. Last question before we get to story time, Pete. You kind of mentioned that folks can become involved in a multitude of different ways, but take me, for example, no military experience, not a ton of like tailwheel experience or anything else. Is there really a reasonable chance that someday if I started volunteering and doing the right things, that someday I could be a pilot of one of these aircraft?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely no reason not to. It all kind of depends on how much time. And obviously, you're going to have to give of your time to kind of work your way up the ladder and obviously have the right credentials to begin with as well. Even if you don't have tailwheel experience, which obviously if you're going to go fly the B-17 or fly some of the tailwheel fighters and stuff like that, that's an absolute requirement. So you kind of have to have that to be able to fly that sort of equipment. But, there's airplanes, the B-25s that try. We have T-34s, T-28s in the organization as well. So there's stuff out there that is tricycle gear. We do have guys flying that don't have a lot of tailwheel experience in the B-25, and that's fine. I would say for anybody who wants to do that, it doesn't matter about your background. I mean, if you want to fly the airplanes and you're especially a professional pilot, there's no reason you don't have the experience, especially if you have the tailwheel experience to come out and start flying the airplanes at some point. Just come out and start volunteering. See what the organization is like, or that specific organization that you go volunteer with, and kind of see what the path is. And then, just ask the guys that are flying it, gals that are flying it, what the path is that they went through and start along the path.
That's so cool. Now, secretly, Pete had texted me and said he did a 3-day trip with Max. He said there's no chance Max will ever fly a warbird. He saw firsthand. But other than that,
Well, that's not what he said to me. He said I was already a shoo-in on the P-51, just going straight there.
Sure.
No big deal.
Right. All right. So, Pete, we've enjoyed hearing so much about your background and your experiences. We love to close every interview with stories. And I mentioned you got to have a few from your days in the F-16, the bomber, everything. Can you narrow it down? Do you have one or two that you could share with us?
Yeah, I don't know what interesting or funny. I'm not quite sure how funny they're going to be. I mean, they're funny to me, but one of the really cool things about flying, they had like a airborne photographer school that we got to do a couple of years out here in Mesa, where they rented a short sky van from down at Eloy, which I don't know if you've ever seen a sky van, but it's kind of a short twin turboprop with a loading ramp in the back. Apparently they rented it from Eloy and then brought up and they put a bunch of photographers on it to do an aerial photography school. And we got the B-17, so we were going to go out and do that. And, I've been flying formation pretty much my whole professional life in the Air Force. So we go out and there's two of us that are formation qualified and we brief it up in great detail about what we're going to do. We're going to go fly around Red Mountain. So you get good background and it's, the light's perfect and all that kind of stuff. And we go in, and if you've ever flown any formation, they're coming in from doing a rejoin from the very back of the airplane is kind of challenging because you don't get any good closure cues. You're just kind of looking at an airplane and suddenly it gets real big. But so we go in and it's, this is going to be no problem. We're just going to chase the airplane around. It's just a short little slug of an airplane. How hard can this be? So we go in. It's like, okay. Oh my gosh, big airplane. And kind of scooch underneath it. So there's a really good picture. I don't know if you've seen the B-17, but there's two big windows above the pilots. So they use to fly formation in. It's not an unsafe maneuver. You just kind of get underneath. So we had vertical separation stuff, but we have a really great photo of me and the other pilot looking up through those two windows at the photographers. It's basically a straight down shot as we're underneath the airplane going, well, that was dumb. Do this better next time. And we kind of slid back at that point and got back behind the airplane and had a great time. That was an awful lot of fun. That was a cool photo shoot. What I didn't realize before we did that was, B-17 is all manual. There's no hydraulic boost. There's nothing like that. And flying the airplane in formation is actually pretty challenging, especially if it's a dynamic formation, because it's so much work, the controls. We were up there for about 25 minutes to 30 minutes, and we came back and it was like, okay, we're done. So generally you have one guy on the throttles, if you're the pilot flying, you'll call out power settings, and the guy on the co-pilot will do the throttle settings. And then you just got both hands on the controls, just kind of keeping it in formation. I have no idea how they did it for 8-9 hours at a time. Absolutely amazing.
That was kind of my wrap-up questions to you, was like, you must have such an incredible appreciation for the young men that flew those airplanes in the war.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
because the challenges that they must have had must have been incredible.
Unpressurized, basically not heated in the back half of the airplane and not much heat in the front of the airplane. They're on oxygen all that time, and they're in formation, flying this in formation. And that's before they even bring in fighter opposition and getting shot at and all that kind of stuff. I mean, just physically flying the airplane was a lot of work. And they did this day after day. It's amazing.
It was a young man's game back then. That's why everyone was in their 20s.
Yeah,
it really was. Yeah, a lot of those guys were 20 years old. By the end of the war, they were taking guys at 18, 19.
Right. You told me something interesting about the B-17, that it actually, some of them had a side stick. Tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, some of the late production airplanes actually had a side stick controller on the left side of the aircraft commander, the left seat, the captain's seat. And it was hooked in through the autopilot because the airplane had a big Honeywell autopilot on it, which was pretty sophisticated for the day. And you could actually control the airplane through the autopilot with this side stick controller. And so it would take some of the strain off of you if you're flying formation in the airplane. You still had to do the engines. You didn't have auto throttle, so you still had to manage those. But you could actually fly the airplane through the autopilot. Just took a lot of the strain off of you. It's kind of amazing what they came up with by the end of the war. Huge technology strides during the course of World War II.
That's what I mean. That's a lot of technology for the 40s.
Amazing. Well, Pete, I've certainly enjoyed talking to you today and learning a lot about something I don't know hardly anything about, which was warbirds. It's fascinating. And I would encourage anyone that's got a CAF airbase in their town to go check it out, because, I mean, even if you're not going to take a ride, you can still probably go look at the airplane. There's often a museum attached. It's just really special, and I've really enjoyed sharing that experience with my son, checking it out. So thank you for all of the volunteer hours you've put in to keep these beautiful airplanes. Many men and women in our community doing the same thing. So it is a real treat, and yeah, it's been really exciting to hear about your experience. Anything you want to say to wrap up, Max?
No, thanks for coming on the show, Pete. I'll start writing down all of my questions for the next time we fly together, so I can do another full interrogation of everything you've been up to.
That'd be great.
Being interviewed by Max for 3 days straight, you're like, I got to drop this trip. I need to trade this thing.
Hey, listen, we passed the time, right? It was
great.
At least
I had a great time
for me.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Dylan. Thanks, Max. It was great to be
awesome. All right.
All right. We appreciate it, Pete. Thank you.
Okay. Joel, if you had to bet, would you bet that Max will or will not be in some type of flying role in a warbird at some point in his career?
Oh, absolutely. I will bet all my money on yes.
I feel like I agree.
It's not a lot of money, but it's all of it.
He's in. I feel like you will log PIC time in a warbird at some point in your...
I would love to, but that is not going to happen until there are none or less children residing in my home, because they take up a lot of time. And you know what else takes up a lot of time? Volunteering at the Commemorative Air Force after flying with Pete. It's another job that just doesn't pay, but it's a whole. I mean, it pays, just not in money.
Exactly.
What airplane would you fly?
Well, the answer, Joel, is whatever airplane they'll let you fly. But
that's true.
If it were up to me,
all right,
I'll give you one guess, Joel. Only one.
Tom Cruise.
P-51, dude. Come on.
All right, that's fair.
It has nothing to do with Tom Cruise.
You saw that movie.
But he's supposed to be in that world. He's known as a good stick. He takes it seriously, and like he works hard at...
Who were we talking about this in a production meeting? How he, like Tom Cruise, has his airplanes like ferried out to him when he's like shooting in different locations?
Somebody said that.
Yeah, you said that, right, Joel?
Yeah, I said that. I sense some doubt by Max there. Now, I don't know if it's all of his airplanes, but yeah, he's got, I don't know, he takes his Honda jet with him, his P-51, something like that. A couple of them. And they just go with him wherever he's on location shooting, so he can always be flying. That's what I heard.
P-51 shuttle pilot.
Can we get him on the podcast?
Yeah. If you are the guy that flies the P-51 around, let us know. Yeah.
Challenge, Joel. Yeah, John Travolta, Harrison Ford,
or Tom Cruise's Mustang guy.
Go.
That moves it around.
That will also be acceptable.
All right, let's dispense some advice here in the flight advice segment, which is kindly and generously and continuously supported by Harvey Watt. We talked a little bit about the loss of medical earlier in the episode. That was the only other thing I would have added to that listener's email. You wonder if they would have had a resource that they could have talked to. Maybe they would have had an alternate path to go to. And that's exactly what Harvey Watt is. Just beyond the insurance that they provide to professional pilots around the world, they're also a resource that you can go to and you can say, hey, I need to do this, or what are my options here? And you can get a kind of an objective third-party opinion and give you some advice that's got your best interest in mind. HarveyWatt.com to see all of the offerings that they provide for professional pilots, not just airline pilots, business aviation as well. What's in the flight advice hopper today?
A new listener the last few months and haven't heard a scenario similar to mine yet, so I figured I'd drop by. I'm looking for some outside, unbiased advice. I'm 29, on the bottom end of the seniority list, and currently fly for an ultra-low-cost carrier with about 1,100 pilots, where I am home every night. The company's relationship with the pilots is at an all-time low due to contract negotiations, poor work rules, and lower pay than our competitors. I'm stuck between if I should stay or if I should go to a place like Southwest, where I have a family member who loves it. If the company gets their act together, actually grows like they say, and pays us industry standards with good work rules, then this place could be absolutely amazing, since we are home every night. unless an unforeseen weather or MX delay forces us to overnight. Typical schedule is showing around 6 to 7 a.m. and home around 1 to 2 p.m. with 14 plus days off holding a line. I think we'll always lag behind in pay since there is not any soft pay, but it's not like I won't make plenty of money to survive and retire with a good chunk of change. It is also a great place to own a side business or real estate. I have a big case of FOMO with this hiring boom and need some help. No family yet, but plan on getting married next year and having a few kids. So it would be nice to be home as much as possible. I appreciate any advice. Keep up the good work with the show.
This is different than what we've gotten. We're keep getting the regional to low-cost carrier email. Let's hold on. Let's just say, hypothetically, I have no idea who this guy flies for, but let's just hypothetically pretend that he's talking about Allegiant, in case anyone didn't pick that up in the email. Let's just pretend that they didn't say that, but let's just pretend for this segment. They're home every night. Here was the first thing I thought of, is when I was reading this, I was like, it doesn't sound like this person has a lot going on outside of flying yet. And then they confirmed that at the end where they said, I'm not married yet, but I'd like to be and then have kids. So I think that's an interesting twist there, because I think part of the benefit of being home every night and having that good seniority, a lot of that value is when you have the family. And so if you don't have that yet, I think the FOMO is stronger. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, obviously already appreciates the quality of life the place he's working is affording him right now. So here's the thing. Everybody, especially now that you can go to the end game airline in your 20s, like very realistically, you don't have quite as much perspective as I think traditionally pilots that were going to the mainline carriers had. But you have to realize, like, as you get older, I think, and stuff too, you do realize that money isn't always the most important thing. And money certainly isn't what makes you happy in the long run. So what does, and not just me saying this, there's like studies and there's actually people that know that I've listened to, but it's relationships you have with people. And to do that, you have to have time. So I've always said one of my favorite quotes is money is not the prime asset, time is. And so you should really consider that whenever you make a career change, is what's going to afford you the most amount of time to do what you actually want to do and dedicate time to the people that you want to spend it with, not just who you get assigned to fly with, the crew you're going to fly with. So I think that if you appreciate the schedule now, to Dylan's point, when you have a family, you're going to appreciate it even more. And certainly there's risk in all of this. And because this business is very unpredictable, the ULCC you're at may not exist in 10 years, or it could be bigger and better and awesome. You just don't know. You really don't. And you have to make decisions based on the available information at the time, which is almost certainly going to change over the long run. So make decisions based on what you can count on and what you know. But everybody has FOMO right now. But just remember, the music will stop. And if you're happy where you're at and you could see yourself staying there, then I would suppress the FOMO. And, we have a friend that is at a similar situation, has stayed there, and he's very happy and he does well. And if you really are that motivated for money, like you said, there are other ways to make money besides flying airplanes. I've always said that chasing money flying airplanes is a tough path to follow. If you're home at 1 or 2 every day, you could show real estate after that. I used to do that. It's very realistic. But again, back to my previous point, then that cuts into the free time that makes this so good. So if that's what it's going to take, you may want to reevaluate and maybe fly somewhere that makes more money, because I tell you, there's not many ways to make the kind of money that an airline pilot can make with as little stress as far as, and when I say stress, it's mostly the stress of when you go home, there's nothing to do. It doesn't follow you home. If you've ever had a job where the job follows you home, that is worth its weight in gold to just leave and you literally have to do nothing but get your shirt dry cleaned, wash your pants, and set your alarm for the next trip.
Possibly polish your shoes. Possibly. And look, I think to your point too, how bad does FOMO bother you? Are you a pretty content person in general? Because look, probably at a ULCC, you're never going to be leading the pay of the industry. You're always going to lag behind. And that's just kind of comes with the territory. So if you have a lot of buddies that are at a different airline and you see them making more money and that's going to just eat at you for the next 15 years, then okay.
That being said, going to a place like Southwest, like the quality of life there is pretty good. There's at least that many days off a month, and you only have to drive to the
There you
airport
go.
once a week. So 3-day is really a 2.5 day, which really ain't that bad. The schedule when he says leaves at 6 and home at 1 or 2, it's kind of the similar thing. You leave at 6 on the first day, you're home on the third day around 1 or 2. For me, that works pretty good.
I would not chastise you for staying.
Each his
We
own.
have friends that have done it, and they seem very happy. Yeah. I think the whole point is it comes down to an individual decision. And like James said, if you think FOMO is bad, just wait till you experience buyer's remorse. Listen, once you get married and have that little kid, I think you're going to want some overnights so you can get some sleep. Right, Joel? You're in the middle of that right now, right?
It's in the weeds.
Yeah.
It's exhausting.
Well, that's going to do it for flight advice. We're always happy to dispense our advice, which is worth exactly what you paid for it. And you can send us your quandaries on our website. There's an anonymous form that says flight advice right on the home page, or you can shoot us an email as well. Always happy to tackle your questions. Thanks for your patience. We've got such a backlog. We're trying to work through these as quick as we can, but I know it's taken us a little while, so doing the best we can. So, Max, I think that is going to do it. Let us know what you want us to review gear-wise. Leave us a comment or a review, and we'll be happy to shoot you some stickers. Thanks so much to our sponsors, Advanced Aircrew Academy, Harvey Watt, Tim Pope, and Max, it's not sponsored, but I've got a little extra bonus content for anyone who wants to stick around after the music and the disclaimer. We have a couple of special guests.
Riveting. I'd highly recommend sticking around.
I'm just going to leave it at that, but all of that you can expect later on. Until next time, just remember, flexibility.
It is the key to air power. We'll see you next time.
The statements made in this show are our own opinions and do not reflect, nor were they under any direction from any of our employers.
Max, we have a special guest here, a new segment on the show. My youngest son, whose goal in life is to be a famous YouTuber, he's going to join us. He's already got his YouTuber name, right? What's going to be your YouTuber name?
Reggie Danger.
Reggie Danger. Okay. So, Reggie Danger, a little segment for you. What is it that you've got for us, Reggie?
Jokes and riddles.
All right. Let's hear them.
What's a duck's favorite donut store?
I don't know. What?
Dunkin' Donuts.
Okay.
Nice.
Did you make that one up, Reggie? Okay. All right. What else do you have for us?
It's not a joke or riddle. Repeat after me.
Okay.
Yellow bus.
Yellow bus.
Yellow bus.
Yellow bus.
Yellow bus.
Yellow bus.
What color's the bus?
Yellow.
You were supposed to say what color's the bus.
Reggie, get me every time. All right. So are we going to be looking forward to more content from you in the future, Reggie? Do you have a YouTube channel people can subscribe to?
No, not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
But I have another joke.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
How does Darth Vader like his chocolate?
I don't
Dark.
know. How does he like it?
On the dark side.
Oh, I thought it was going to be a joke.
Why was a student's report card wet? No, because it was below sea level.
Did he go to Death Valley Elementary School?
All right, Reggie. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for the jokes. We look forward to the next time you come up with some good content. Anything you'd like to say to the audience before you go?
Make sure you subscribe. If you don't, a spider's going to appear in your bed tonight. If you do, you're going to be lucky for the rest of the week. Subscribe for a cookie.
Okay.
Very
All right.
comprehensive.
It's a great message. Yeah.
Appreciate that.
It's a very, very specific. Thank you. All right.
But
Reggie, thank you.
that pretty much sums it up, ladies and gentlemen, right there.
Reggie says goodbye.
Okay. Goodbye, Reggie.
And nothing like when a kid talks in the third person, you know?
One more quick guest I wanted to bring on the show, Max. My oldest son, who, as you know, is a fan of warbirds and World War II aircraft.
Don't I know?
Gavin, you watched the Kee Bird documentary with us.
Yes, I did. I'm so excited to be here, guys.
Can you tell us, what did you think about watching that documentary?
I liked it. It was pretty good. Except for at the end, they were just like, the airplane catches on fire and never makes it. They spent all this time and hard work on it, and that's just...
Gavin, let me ask you a question. Were you more upset when you found out that the mechanic had died or when the airplane caught on fire and burned to the ground?
When the airplane caught on fire and burned to the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that the first time you've kind of watched something without a happy ending?
Probably not.
No.
No.
Okay. I guess some good life lessons.
I got a massage like that a couple weeks ago.
Work hard. Okay, Gavin, one last question to get you out of here on. We've been talking a lot about your dream airplane to fly. If you could fly one airplane, it doesn't have to be functional anymore, but like if you could go in a time machine and fly any airplane ever in history, what would it be?
Except it can't be a PC-12. That's the only limitation.
Yeah.
Okay. I would fly in the Martin Mariner. I think my dad said the same thing in a different podcast. There is no flying ones, and it would be super fun.
Why do you love the Martin Mariner so much?
It's just really big. It's so cool. It's a flying boat, which is a seaplane, which is a very big seaplane.
Now, Gavin, why do you like the Mariner more than the Martin Mars? I feel like the Martin Mars would be a superior aircraft. Explain to me precisely why you like the Mariner more.
I don't actually. Not really. I don't really like it more.
Are you familiar with the Martin Mars?
Yeah.
It's huge.
What do you know about it?
Uh-huh. I know there's one still flying. They were huge cargo planes that were flying boats, and they came after the Mariner after World War II, and they had 4 engines. There was I think 3 or 4 JRM-1 Mars, and I think there was one JRM-2 Mars called the Caroline Mars. It was bigger than the other one.
That's correct, Gavin. That one was actually delivered to the United States Navy 10th of May, 1948, and sold in 1959 and converted to a forest firefighting aircraft by Forest Industry Flying Tankers, registered Charlie Foxtrot Lima Yankee Mike. The aircraft was damaged beyond repair during Typhoon Frida in Victoria, Canada on 12 October 1962. So, I am familiar.
He knew all that from memory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's memory.
Yeah,
Really?
see, Gavin recited all that from memory, Max, which
So did
was
I.
pretty impressive. Yeah. Oh, okay.
I mean, there's
Yeah,
just, Gavin, I don't know
sounded
about you,
like it.
but there is nothing like the roar of 4 Wright R3350 duplex Cyclone 18-cylinder radial engines rated at 2,500 horsepower apiece. As that powers the 4-bladed
Wow.
Curtiss Electric 15.2-inch diameter variable pitch propellers. It's just a sight to see. So
Yeah, I bet.
we're on the same page, bro.
I know the
Yeah.
yeah, the firefighting one is like white and red.
That's
I
right.
think.
I
It's
believe
so
that
cool.
might be for sale right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we looked at that. Yeah, it is for sale. Very expensive.
Yep. All right. Let me ask you this, Gavin. If you could, would you go try and rescue the Kee Bird?
No.
Would you go on a rescue mission like that? No.
No.
No, you're good.
Where would you rescue the Mariner from?
Oh, there's 2 of them at the bottom of Lake Washington. One of them, the tail broke off, and it's currently at the Pima Air and Space Museum.
What about the one that's close to your house?
That one's still, though there's one a few hours from here in Tucson at the Pima Air and Space Museum, and that one, that's the only one left in the world.
He's talking about ones to salvage. There's
Yeah.
2 in Lake Washington.
Well,
yeah.
That last Mars was listed for sale last year for $5 million US.
Who bought it?
I don't know.
Someone with a lot of... How many cylinders is that? How many cylinders are you buying? Like 60
72?
cylinders?
Can you imagine that? How many spark plugs is that?
That's
Gavin, do you know how many spark plugs? If you have
Um,
72 cylinders, how many spark plugs that would be?
What's a spark plug?
144 spark plugs, Gavin.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's a lot. It's a lot. All right, Gavin. Anything else you want to say about your thoughts on the Kee Bird before we wrap up?
I rate the documentary 7 out of 10.
7 out of 10.
Ooh.
It was good.
Okay.
Harsh.
Okay. All right, boys. Thank you very much.